Hello friends, today we're going to be talking about why high-dose thiamine /B1 is an absolute game changer for IBS, SIBO and constipation. Now, if you are currently dealing with IBS, SIBO and constipation, I'm imagining you wouldn't have clicked this video if you weren't, then this might give you some clarity of some things that you could look into, right? So a ton of gut issues people think are SIBO, bloating, dysbiosis, but it actually can be a thiamine deficiency. Now, I'm not telling you that this is the one sole thing that's going to fix everything for your life, but this could be part of the puzzle that you look into to help on your journey to healing whatever gut issue that you're dealing with. Okay. Now, if you don't know who I am, my name is Will. I had a crazy transformation of my own gut health, which completely changed my life. Now I'm in a privileged position to be able to help you guys do the same. I teach people on YouTube and I also coach people as well to help them get to their best selves through transforming their gut health and overall their health as well. Okay, so let's get into it. Let's also make sure that my mic is on before I record the whole video and realize it's not on. I've done that before, by the way, and it sucks. Okay, it is on. We're good. So the issue is a thiamine deficient gut. Okay, thiamine and B1 are the same thing. It's part of the B complex family. If you've ever taken a B complex before, you'll see on the back says B1 thiamine. It's a nutrient, it's a mineral. It can sometimes imitate gut issues like SIBO. A thiamine deficient gut could cause low stomach acid, which is the second part of digestion to break down your food. It could cause constipation. It could cause leaky gut. It could cause even chronic diarrhea as well. Low enzymes, things like this. These can then cause SIBO. So then you're dealing with the SIBO, but maybe it's actually because you have a thiamine deficient gut. Okay, because B1 will mimic the symptoms of gut conditions, again, like the bloating, constipation, SIBO, even reflux, because the digestion is being controlled by the nervous system, okay? Now, I don't want to overcomplicate this today. I want to make it really easy so the average person can understand it. So stay with me now, okay? The vagus nerve is the main communication between the gut and the brain. You can see on the picture on the right, the vagus nerve it controls everything, right? Just as electricity goes from your wall to your computer, it's just how the vagus nerve works from your brain to your gut, whatever. It sends signals, right? Now, it carries signals between your brain, heart, and digestion, and they're a key part of your parasympathetic nervous system, which is the rest and digest state, right? Now, the reason thiamine is so important is because thiamine helps produce neurotransmitters, such like acetylcholine, which is the main neurotransmitter that the vagus nerve utilizes for power, right? So when we have a B1 deficiency, this can impair such processes, leading to poor digestion, motility issues, dysregulation of gut function, which all contribute and mimic the conditions like SIBO, IBS, bloating, etc. Okay? So when we actually have low B1, we then have low production of neurotransmitters. The vagus nerve then has no energy to grab off, essentially. And then we call it poor vagal tone, which is a weak vagus nerve. If you have a weak vagus nerve, that then equals weak digestion because you need the vagus nerve for communication between the gut and the brain. And then the weak digestion can equal symptoms. You staying with me? Hopefully that makes sense. We're not going to overcomplicate it. There's more to it, but that's all you need to know. Low B1, gut symptoms. That's an issue because of the vagus nerve, right? And then there's a lot of people who are doing, this is important, but like meditation and all like the vagus nerve work to support like the humming and the singing and all these things that can activate the vagus nerve and support the vagus nerve. But perhaps you actually have a nutrient deficiency, which means your vagus nerve can't be supported. So we need to support it with the right nutrients. And B1, in my opinion, is the most important. Now, a lot of us have a thiamine deficiency. And the reason that we do in this modern day is because of four main reasons. Diet choices, especially high carb and refined sugar. Oxidative stress, which if you don't know what it is, all oxidative stress is when your free radicals, essentially the bad guys, the germs, there's more of them than there is antioxidants. So when you're going through an illness, typically you are dealing with oxidative stress in the body, okay? Increased demand in things like pregnancy, or if you have a thyroid condition or alcohol consumption, you are demanding more of thiamine to do its work, okay? And also poor absorption. So if you have, again, leaky gut, or if you have SIBO, or if you have gut issues in themselves, that can then cause B1 issues. So you can see how there's a vicious cycle of gut issues, then B1, which then the B1 will cause gut issues. And there's a lot of these vicious cycles in health in general. Another example would be anxiety and gut health issues. They have a bidirectional relationship, meaning that they cause each other, which sometimes it can be quite hard to break the cycle, but that's what we're here to do. So you can look around you today and you can see how many people are, on high carb diets. I'm not saying carbs are bad, but, really, really high carb diets, alcohol, stress, and then they end up getting B1 deficiencies because it's depleting B1 out of the stores. So your cells will store B1. And when you do these things, it rapidly uses your stores up, which is then you get a deficiency and then you get issues. Okay, so our job now is to replenish those stores of TTFD so you can then have more flexibility in the stress and the diets and the alcohol, and you're not going to get gut issues. That's what we need to do, rebuild the stores, because currently you're likely struggling, as most people are. Again, I don't want to overcomplicate this, but there are many types of B1, right? There's thiamine HCL, there's TTFD, there's benfotiamine, etc. We're only going to focus on thiamine HCL and TTFD because that's all that we need to do for gut health issues. The other ones can be used for peripheral nervous system issues, if you have neuropathy, things like this. But to keep it really simple, we'll just stick with the two. Now, the thiamine HCL, you'll find in all your drugstores. When you look at B1 in Holland and Barrett or wherever you are in the world, you'll find thiamine HCL. It's everywhere, right? The problem with thiamine HCL is that it's very, very dependent on cellular transporters. Again, let's not overcomplicate it. It's just a very poor bioavailability, right? You can take it. How much is your body actually utilizing? Very, very little, right? Thiamine HCL is kind of crap, but sometimes it can be useful. TTFD, however, is different. Now, I always forget the long name of TTFD. You can look it up if you like. But essentially, TTFD is thiamine. It's just a more bioavailable form of thiamine. It binds a thiamine molecule with a sulfur group, and this allows thiamine to enter freely into the cells and bypassing all those transport systems, which makes it much more bioavailable. It means your cells can actually use the thiamine then to produce the neurotransmitters to support the vagus nerve, all these things, and actually can cross the blood-brain barrier, which is really important as well. And it has a direct effect on your digestive system, and it's good for your CNS, which makes it great for people, people who I used to be like, who are dealing with SIBO, IBS. So again, if you're dealing with those conditions, TTFD could be a great option for you. And by the way, guys, TTFD, this type of thiamine, has been used for many, many years in Japan. It's just not a thing in the Western world. So definitely have a look into that if you're interested. But they had an issue because they rely so heavily on rice that they were getting a lot of constipation issues. And they realized that the rice was depleting their B1 stores, so they had to replenish it with TTFD to fix both constipation and SIBO. The Japanese are very good at this. They also know that SIBO is caused by constipation, which is very, very obvious. So we need to fix the constipation if you want to fix SIBO, if you are dealing with SIBO. Again, I don't know what you're dealing with, but whatever. Cool. So... and we're going to get into how we use both of them and the protocol for that to replenish your stores. And you might be asking yourself, well, how do I know if I'm B1 deficient? We're going to get into that. But to be honest, there's a question with a lot of those things, because sometimes when people say, I don't know if this is the right thing for me, sometimes I just give them the solution and see how they feel. If they feel better on it, then they needed it. If not, then so what, they tried, and it's usually not expensive to do anyway. You can get certain tests done to look at thiamine more accurately. A blood test isn't going to show on a cellular level. It's just going to show a snapshot of the blood. Therefore, if it does say your thiamine levels are fine, it doesn't mean your cellular levels are fine. And you could still be B1 deficient on a cellular level and still be having issues, or your B1 could be causing your issues as well. Okay, just to make that clear. Now, so our goal at some point, ideally, is to take TTFD, right, which is a thiamine derivative. Thiamine, when we do TTFD, it's classed as a megadose, right? We're doing a very high dose of TTFD to, again, build up those stores. Now, what actually classes a megadose? Well, it's not specific. There's no like 100 milligrams or 200 milligrams is now a megadose. We're just doing a very high bioavailable form of thiamine for ourselves. And when we do this, we actually need to take things called cofactors. So we can't just take the B1 alone. We need to take cofactors with it, because when we take high doses of thiamine, it demands other nutrients. So we need to take those alongside it to make sure we're supporting the body, right? That's all it is. So if you do look into taking high dose thiamine, you have to make sure that you have to take magnesium, a B complex, and enough potassium. Okay. Those are the core foundations that you have to take if you're looking to do a thiamine protocol. Okay. If you're going to ask about dosing, we can get into that. I think with potassium, most people are very deficient anyway. You need around 2,000 milligrams of potassium, and most people are getting nowhere near that. especially between their sodium and potassium ratio. You need around 3 potassium to 1 sodium, and everyone's always flipped on that. B complex, you could just take a single dose of that, and magnesium, again, that can really depend on the individual, but we can get into that. And if you need any help with this, just go to the first link in my description and you can book a free discovery call and we can see how we can help you with your specific issues. There also are some additional cofactors. So with TTFD, as we mentioned, hopefully you guys are not being lost with this. Any questions, you can leave it down below. Because we said that TTFD, the one thiamine molecule, was added with a sulfur group. Some people can have issues with metabolizing sulfur. Me personally, I was one of those people. Because it's such a high dose, the sulfur can be a little bit overwhelming. So sometimes we need additional cofactors. Now, molybdenum, which is the first one on your screen that you can see there, helps with sulfur metabolism. So for example, when I started taking TTFD, I started getting a lot more gas, a lot more bloating, which can be normal because we're going to get into paradoxical reactions, but it was a little bit excessive. And the molybdenum helped the sulfur metabolism to make it easier. So sometimes that can be something that you take alongside it anyway, or maybe you want to trial and error. A lot of this stuff is going to be trial and error. And then also you want to be taking, ideally, selenium. Now, selenium, you don't have to take in a supplement form. You can get a lot of selenium bioavailability in Brazil nuts. So if you can have Brazil nuts, I would do Brazil nuts to get your selenium. And also glutathione. Glutathione is your body's masked antioxidant. So you could look into this. Now, maybe you're doing testing and you can see if your glutathione levels are low. If they are, definitely get them up, which you can either use NAC, which is a precursor to glutathione, or you can use liposomal glutathione. And that is because TTFD boosts energy production in the mitochondria, which naturally causes more oxidative stress. So help neutralizing that. So these are the additional cofactors that I would probably recommend, but these are the absolute foundational that you have to do if you're going to use TTFD and you're going to do a B1 protocol. And also, interestingly enough, if you have a thiamine deficiency, that can cause oxidative stress. And you can see that's another example of those loops that you get stuck in, right? TTFD or a thiamine deficiency can cause oxidative stress. Oxidative stress can cause thiamine deficiency, and you get stuck in this circle of unhealthiness, I suppose. And that actually can cause neurodegeneration as well. Things like Alzheimer's, not ideal. Obviously, we don't want to be dealing with that, okay? So, as I mentioned before, there can be paradoxical reactions. Now, arguably, the more paradoxical reactions that you get, the more your body actually needs thiamine, okay? So what is a paradoxical reaction? A paradoxical reaction is essentially where your body feels worse before you feel better. So maybe if you're dealing with constipation due to a thiamine deficiency, you might get a paradoxical reaction, meaning you feel worse before you feel better, okay? Again, very common paradoxical reactions is fatigue, because you're flooding your body with thiamine, and your receptors and your enzymes might not be ready for that. So they have to work overtime to break down this new influx of thiamine, and they have to work, as I say, overtime. So sometimes there's a transitional period where your body has to adapt from a really low thiamine point to a really high thiamine point. That's why we want to go slow and build up. And that also why it would make sense that if you're really low in thiamine, then you would get more of a paradoxical reaction because your body is so used to such little thiamine. Does that make sense? You can't answer me. I don't know what I'm asking, but that's how it would work. Okay. So we need to understand paradoxical reactions. Now, that's why we want to start slow, where we can get this little bit of a dip. So it's manageable. And then when your reactions go back to baseline, then you can increase your dose of TTFD. Okay. We want to go slow, go low and go slow with B1. That would be ideal for most of you. Again, because sometimes it can cause a very stimulating effect because it's kind of switching on that vagus nerve in your nervous system. People sometimes can feel anxious or wired or just very sensitive. So again, that's all very normal, but we just want to go slow so we can manage that. Okay. Cool. Right. I think that's everything in terms of that. In terms of client application then, when I'm working with people, when do I use B1? Now, I always recommend everyone to do some form of B1 at some point because I think it's great for optimization, even for energy, because you need B1 for ATP production, which is part of your mitochondria, the energy in your cells. So it's great for providing you with energy, and it's actually used for many different conditions, including chronic fatigue syndrome as well. So there's so many useful applications of TTFD. Now we're only referring it to gut issues, but there's a whole load of things that you could look into. There's some great studies as well. It's amazing what just a little bit of B1 supplementation can do to you. When I'm actually coaching people, when do I use B1? Because I don't always use B1. I always recommend people to look into B1, my clients, at the end of a process. In terms of using B1, if they're dealing with chronic constipation and we've tried the basic things like Trafala, which is a natural bowel stimulant, we've adjusted magnesium and potassium, we've adjusted their diet, and if they're still dealing with chronic constipation, then that's when it's usually time to add in things like B1 to get some more quick results. It's just that B1 can be quite fiddly with paradoxical reactions and things like that. So it's not always my first go-to for people. TTFD anyway. We might introduce Thiamine HCL, but not TTFD, because again, it can be a bit fiddly. And usually when you're first working with someone, you want to get quick wins. You want them to feel better quickly, and then we can work on more of the long-term thing. I think TTFD is more of a long-term application. That's typically when I use it. So what's the protocol? What do I do? Now, it can really depend if you're sensitive. And how do you know if you're sensitive? Well, you don't. Okay. Unless you start taking it. Now, some people just take 100 milligrams of TTFD and they just ride the wave. If they feel awful and they feel really tired, then they'll be like, okay, I know where my limit is. I know I'm sensitive. I recommend most people build up anyway. I think it's generally just a good rule. And typically, if you've never taken a B complex before or any B sort of vitamins, I would start with that B1 HCL. You know, we mentioned before that it's not very great bioavailability, but it's a good entry point to build you up. And then you can transition into the really high bioavailable form, which is the TTFD. So typically, this is what I did, and usually what I recommend people to do is to start with B1 HCL and then build up to around 400, 500 milligrams of B. I don't know why I put B2 there, but B1. And that can just set the baseline. That's not going to cause any miracles. Again, it's 10% bioavailable, usually doesn't cause any changes. I have had clients in the past who literally were just on B1 HCL and they literally said their constipation really clicked. That was the thing that did it for them. So it definitely can cause good results, but typically it's not where the miracles happen. The miracles is where longer term TTFD. And then you want to kind of build up on TTFD, 25 milligrams, 50 milligrams, 100 milligrams. Again, these aren't set rules. You can literally make it up. You can, for me, like I took 50 milligrams. I felt too fatigued. I was like, okay, I'm going to drop down to 25 first, right? There aren't strict rules. You just kind of make it up and trial and error and you go along with it. And I've had people before where they've took 100 milligrams straight off the bat. They felt no difference. So it really depends on the individual. And of course, during these weeks as well, you want to be taking the cofactors. Obviously, I haven't mentioned it here, but that'll be really important that you do as well, the magnesium, potassium, and B complex. The effective dose for TTFD, the minimum effective dose, is anywhere between 100 milligrams and 1,500 milligrams. Now, so ideally, you want to at least build up to 100 milligrams. And then I think the sweet spot for most people, right, is around 400. Now, if you're trying to target extreme chronic fatigue or extreme chronic gut issues and you're kind of more on the more severe spectrum, then of course you need more medical intervention and you want to be careful with that. And I mean, I'm not a medical professional anyway, so any of this is just for educational purposes. So please reach out to your doctor if you are interested in doing any of these kind of protocols. But I think 400 is the max that most people would need to go up to. Again, it's really individual and people might not feel any difference until they go even higher. So they might have to play around with that. But I would say for most people, 400 is what you could build up to. I would say at least 100. For me, I did around 100, 200 and I felt pretty good on it. Okay. And for me, I noticed that my motility kind of switched on. Like I had that switched on feeling where like things were now moving, things were shifting. I was getting consistent bowel movements every day. My motility was better. My digestion was better. And because it kind of bypasses all those cellular transporters that we mentioned before, it acts pretty quickly. For me, I can feel it within 30 minutes. Obviously not now because my body's built up its stores and it's when I take TTFD now, I don't really feel much different unless I was doing a much higher dose. But I've had people who take it and within 10, 20, 30 minutes are like, wow, like I feel a bit buzzed, like my nervous system is firing. And that's good, but you just have to be aware of that because sometimes that can cause anxiety for some people if you're not ready for it. Again, as I've been speaking sometimes that can cause anxiety for some people if you're not ready for it. Again, as I've been speaking this entire thing, there are some individual differences that you need to be aware of. I've seen people that may only need 25 milligrams of TTFD and they've changed their life on that and that's enough for them. People might not react to TTFD even at high doses. They might not respond. They might not be a responder. That could be something that happens, right? They might not even need TTFD. In fact, I'm you might be watching this video and like, wow, this might be the one thing I'm missing, but maybe it's not. Maybe it's not. Maybe you need something else, and that's okay. Maybe this isn't the therapy for you. Okay. People may react badly to TTFD to the point where they actually can't take it. Okay. And you can have too much TTFD, right? You can get to the point where you get too jittery, too anxious, too much, and your stores of B1 are going too high, and you actually go the opposite effect where you start getting symptoms of too much TTFD. So again, it's really important that you are tapped into your own feeling and your intuition of how you're feeling, because as I always say on this channel, your body is your best response. As someone who is coaching you or whatever, like, I can only tell you so much. At the end of the day, you know how you feel. If at the end of the day you're like, I don't feel good, or, and again, this can be a bit weird because there are paradoxical reactions. You have to prepare not to feel good, but you have to, it's difficult to kind of get that skill, but you have to be in tune with your body. And that's something that you'll learn over the weeks anyway. I think I've covered everything when it comes to TTFD. I want to keep it simple. There's a whole load of stuff that we can kind of go into, and it gets a lot more clinical and scientific. And if you are looking to learn more, then there's a guy on YouTube called EO Nutrition who goes into a lot more detail, and does a lot more clinical practices, and his lectures are like 2 hours long. So if you are interested in that, I would highly recommend to go watch him. And a lot of the stuff that I've learned has been through him as well. So go do that. Okay, go do that. If you guys have any questions, drop them down below. I've had a lot of people who have messaged me. I do TikTok live, stuff like that, who've come in and said, wow, thiamine and TTFD has actually really changed the game for me. I had someone who said it fixed their entire reflux, which would make sense because one of the reasons why we get reflux is poor vagal tone as well. So sometimes that can also fix reflux and other conditions as well. So honestly, just amazing. And I think sometimes like maybe giving it a try and seeing how you feel. What's the worst that could happen? You just stop it. Again, I would always do it under medical supervision. And yeah, it's very hard to overdose. I know we said, I don't know what the exact lethal dose is, but I know it's incredibly high. Of course, do your own research. I know there's studies where athletes have taken 2,000 milligrams of TTFD daily, and that seems optimal for them. It's really great application for athletes because, as we said before, that increased demand when we're doing a lot of exercise, that stress on our body can also deplete our thiamine resources as well. And that's why we need to supplement with something that can rebuild those stores, I guess. Anyway, guys, appreciate you tuning in. Again, any questions, drop them down below, and I'll see you soon. Adios.